Let's talk about submission escapes. Obviously, submission escapes, we're going to focus on those submissions that we looked at from the mount series. So we're not going to go into, all submissions escape or anything. We're going to look at basically two submissions escapes, the one that are the most common from a mount situation, which is katagatame, so arm triangles, or armbar escape, and armbar escape. But before that, I wanted to introduce a little bit the topic. First of all, when we talk about submissions, understand one thing. The number one enemy of submissions is movement, okay? And the other face of the coin is that submissions are pins, okay? Because what a submission is a control that allows you to pin your partner in place long enough to get a tap, okay? Which means from a defensive perspective, it means that if you want to get out of submissions, you have to move, okay? And we're going to look at how this applies in different scenarios, but understand that all those defenses that you might see in which you basically just close everything super tight and you just kind of, you lock your over wedge yourself in place, those will not allow you to get out, because to get out of submission, you have to move. And that's why it's very hard to submit, very young, very explosive people that even maybe they don't really know what they're doing, but they can put so much energy. They're just hard to, pin them down for long enough to get a tap. Okay. So if you get a very basic example, if I cannot pin my partner in place for a few seconds, I just cannot go into my attacks. I cannot start separating these arms. I cannot get a tap, okay? This armbar position, before anything, is a pin. And it's a pin that allows you to get a tap. And the same goes with any submission, okay? First of all, they're pins that lead to a submission. With that said, the whole thing will be to generate movement so that you can start getting out, okay? So that's number one. Number two is different stages of escape. When we talk about submission escape, understand that, as I said earlier, when we talk about mount escapes, bad positions are rated on a curve, okay? They're graded on a curve, and there's a spectrum of situations in which, you have to recognize in which stage you find yourself in. When we talk about submission, we tend to distinguish between recognizing the danger as it were. So basically my partner is kind of in his mind is forming this idea of going to a submission. Then early stage, and then later stage escape. These are usually the things that we work with, the categories that we work with. And this makes a huge difference because sometimes, and we're going to see this real cases of this, there are situations in which you still think you are in a late stage escape, but maybe you're not. And so you're opting for a less high percentage position while you could opt for a more high percentage just because you think you're in the wrong stage. This sounds very, very abstract, but we're going to look at this in practice. The third thing that I want to talk about is, I don't remember, what's the third thing I want to talk about? Fuck. Oh yeah, sorry, of course. Okay. The third thing I want to talk about is, again, this idea of going from a defensive to an offensive cycle, okay? I said this over and over again, but if you roll with high-level players, you're in a submission, and the same way that the high-level player can start chaining pins so that, someone takes your back, you get out of the back, you get mounted. You got to mount, you're in bottom side control, you get out side control, now they're again on your back. Again. People do the same thing with submissions. They start chaining submission until eventually they exhaust you and eventually they get a tap. So it's very important when we talk about submissions, not just to go back either, obviously worst case scenario, to another submission, but even to neutral, okay? You want to go back into an offensive cycle.